Hi everyone, welcome to the 22 plus keynote address. The 22 plus group is unique. We wanted to take this time to address the things that actually concern us and how we apply Jainism in our lives. And who better to do that than two members of our own Jain community. Today we are lucky enough to have Anand Shah and Priyanka Shah, two members of the YJA community and YJA board alumni, to share with us how they navigate the in-between. Priyanka Shah is a physician's assistant, lifestyle creator, and founder of Pinky's Palette, where she shares Jain vegan recipes rooted in ahimsa. Her work has been featured by BBC, Pearson Education, and Eating by Topic documentaries. She works at a hospitalist PA at Stanford Health and also practices aesthetic medicine. She's a first-time mom to a baby boy, and outside of work, she loves traveling, DIY projects, and finding great vegan food. Anand Shah is a PhD candidate at MIT, where he researches topics at the intersection of economics and computer science. He researches how best to design existing institutions around emerging technologies, especially AI. In his free time, he likes to box, listen to podcasts dangerously fast, and go on impromptu Chipotle runs with this nearest willing friend. Before we welcome these two to the stage, just a quick content warning. The keynote does contain some sensitive, potentially triggering material. If at any time you feel the need to step out, please feel free to. And in advance, michami dukram. And now, please give a warm welcome to Priyanka Shah and Anand Shah.
Anand, what are you doing on my stage?
What are you doing here?
I'm supposed to be the keynote speaker for 22 plus.
No. They told me that I was going to be the 22 plus keynote speaker today.
But I have way more followers than you.
I can't actually compete with that at all. But there's some cards here. What do you say we make it even Steven, play a couple of hands, and decide who goes first?
Well, a card game for a Jain keynote, they definitely don't believe we prepared an intro.
No. I mean, what better way to do a Jain intro than cards, right? We're always talking about how karma dictates all of the cards we're going to get dealt. You know, what body we're born into, the problems we're going to have in our lives, maybe even the swag we have on a daily basis. So why don't we just play?
But Anand, Jainism doesn't just say, this is your destiny. You might have these cards that you've been given, and you might not have control over the hand you've been given, but you do have control on how you play it, your intention, your effort, your purusharth.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it now. So the art of the in-between is what happens in between the cards you're dealt and the hands you play. It's the distance between maybe niyati and purusharth.
Between destiny and effort.
Okay, well, we've talked about destiny and effort. Maybe we should just play a couple of hands, huh?
All right.
I have 2 aces. How about that?
I have 6, 7.
I'm doing keynote with a boomer.
I'm literally a millennial, and I thought that's what you guys like. I mean, isn't that your generation's thing?
No. This is 22 plus, and actually, I think that means we don't have to impress any 14-year-olds in the room. We're not trying to make any friends here.
Okay, awkward.
So I'll okay.
Fine, you go first.
Well, in that case, while Priyanka goes to look up the definition of Gen Z, I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming everybody to this year's 22 plus keynote. Today, we'll be talking about stories from the in-between. So we're going to start with a thought experiment, actually. I want you guys to imagine your coolest, smartest friend. Let's make them in medicine. They're capable of doing anything. I basically already told you they're a golden child. And they've got it all figured out. They are doing some fancy training. They're finishing up being an orthopedic surgeon because they're perfect. They just got married and they're about to start a family. And you know what? They're probably about to start making a lot of money. Literally, things could not be better. And now, I want you to imagine you get a call from them. It's just a couple of weeks before their birthday, ring, ring, ring. They call you up. And they tell you, listen, dude, I've been thinking. No good conversation starts like that. And they tell you, I've been thinking, I want to quit. You're like, quit? Quit what? They're like, no, I want to quit medicine. It's not making me happy. And actually, I think what is going to make me happy is leaving all this to go find myself. I want to go travel a bit. What do you say to them? They have had all the right cards their whole life. They have worked hard, stayed up late, and you've seen them do it. And now, as they're about to win the house, they're going to fold. What do you want to say to them? Do you want to grab them by the shoulders and shake them a bit? It's fine if you're going through a slump. These things happen. You've worked so hard, you can't give all of this up. Snap out of it. And wait. You said travel the world. You have a family, dog. You're not going anywhere. Think about it. Raise your hand if you've heard this story before. A couple of people, smatterings. We've all heard this story before. It's actually the first story we hear in Pathshala, slightly different. You see, this is the story of Mahavir Bhagwan's Diksha when he turned 30 years old, told from the perspective of his best friend. It's not crazy for you to have wanted to shake, at that time, Prince Vardhaman out of this. It's what his mom, dad, wife all tried to do. But at the moment when he decided he was not going to live this life anymore, he was done. And he walked out the city gates. I'm starting with this story because I think we always think about these stories in terms of their ending, in terms of Mahavir Bhagwan as Bhagwan. But the reason we tell these stories is because of the beginning, because of Mahavir Bhagwan as Mahavir, which means courageous. These stories are about courage, about how much courage it takes to leave a kingdom, to leave your family, to leave your buddies, all the people that have ever loved you and cared about you, and all of these people begging you not to go, to not do the thing you want to do. These are the stories we grow up with and the values that have been passed down to us. Because we might think we're in this room for a lot of different reasons. Maybe we're here because we like YJA and want to hang out with our friends. Yeah. Maybe we're here, this is going to get it. Maybe we're here because we love New Jersey. All right, a couple of New Jersey fans. I'm not one of them. But whatever you think the reason you're here is, the real reason is that you're Jain. Somewhere up your line, whether it's you, your mom, or your great dada, someone cared enough about Jainism to somehow make the universe conspire to put you here today. We all inspire these values. We all inherit them as part of our worldviews. And these Jain values have shaped us in ways that we probably don't even know. What I'm offering today is that Jainism, in all of its stories, reminds us to live courageously, to live true to who you are, your sense of self, your values, even when it's a bit risky or scary. So today I'm going to talk about two stories from my life where I've had to think about this a bit. But the difference, of course, is that I'm not enlightened, so it's entirely possible I made the wrong decisions. Throughout the stories, I want you guys to think, with my values, with who I am, what would I have done? Okay, well, I'm sorry, I literally just started lecturing at you guys, and you guys don't know anything about me. Hi, my name is Anand Shah. It's very nice to see you all. And in my day job, I'm a researcher. So I'm doing my PhD at MIT. I'm studying econ and CS, and as the bio said, I'm mostly working on AI. And that is both building it as a technology, but trying to think about, as it hits the world, what's going to change? And how will we have to change differently? How will we have to live differently? Now, when I first got to the PhD program, I was ecstatic. It was everything I ever wanted it to be. I worked really hard to get there. I thought I was there to work on the most impactful questions in the world, and indeed I was. I was working with brilliant colleagues. The pace was fast. It was perfect. It was genuinely perfect. But then, as time went on, as I got to the end of my second year, I started feeling a little differently. I started feeling like the charm was wearing off. That academia was slow, that I wasn't really seeing the impact of my work anymore. And honestly, I started feeling terrible because I had worked so hard to get here, and now I was just wondering, did I make a big mistake? What am I doing here? And so, me being a kind of intense person, I thought, well, if this is a mistake and I'm itching for impact, what do I want to do? Well, I want to do something, I want to build something. So I found a buddy, and we ran towards doing a startup together out of some research that we were doing together. And it was going pretty great. We poured our souls into it. We worked really, really hard, and we actually started getting some traction. We started getting users from the MIT ecosystem. We had a couple of big checks being written for us, and we felt good about our product. Until two things happened. As with all startups, or at least most of them, things happen. The first was that we had two competitors enter, capitalized by the two largest VC firms in the world. This honestly was okay. It's scary, but I thought it was okay because I thought our product was better than theirs, and I was kind of excited to go toe-to-toe with them. But the second thing was that my co-founder was a little bit more hesitant to continue because at this point, there was no such thing as keeping the PhD on a shelf and doing the startup full time. There's no way. This is the time when you have to make a decision. And he was like, there's no way I'm going to leave my PhD. It's going great. This was fun, and that's that. This is the first decision I have to make that's a little bit hard. Where I have to think, do I go forward with what I want to do? I feel good about the product. I think I can compete, but I do it without my co-founder. I do it without the guy that I built the entire product with. Or do I go back to the PhD? And as I do any time I have a hard decision, I start thinking about my family. And in particular, what my Nanaji would do. Like many of our families, and maybe like many people in the audience, he came here with nothing. And even despite having polio as a child, so that destiny gave him less than a body that we would normally consider a body, he never let any of that stop him from building what some people might call a motel empire in the American South. More than that, he brought most of my mom's family to the United States. But throughout all of that he did and all of that he continues to do, I've never seen him make a sentimental decision. We all have different families, but this is something that I've never seen him do. He didn't need big parties, never spent frivolously. Maybe most obviously, he left his entire life in India to come to London and then the US to just try to make anything work. Thinking about my Nanaji, I started to realize that all of my thinking for the startup was strangely emotional. I did not want to give up on it because I didn't want to feel like I was giving up. And I was embarrassed to go back to the PhD because I thought I'd be struggling to catch up with everyone else. And because after I'd left, how can you go back? In my head, I'd always imagined going back having, a startup that exited for, a couple decamillions and being a big guy on campus. Not the guy who spent half of a year building a startup and then realized it wasn't going to go anywhere. The values and stories I'd heard from my family made me realize that continuing bullishly along with this startup was actually the path of least resistance for me. It was a way to avoid having to confront this problem of actually, do I want to do research or not? It was a way to run away from that decision. So I thought very carefully about it, and I realized the reasons I wanted to do a PhD are still the same today. I'm a little wiser, I know a little more, but I still want to do science. I still have questions I want answered. So we decided to close shop, and I went back into the ideas business. And honestly, this was the Jordan return, baby. I did feel super embarrassed, and I was behind everyone. But now I have all the questions and energies of my first year, but also I know a little bit more. I have some perspective from this little adventure, this detour I've taken. And I'm looking at everything differently. I'm having a great time. I'm attacking the work again. And I'm curious again. So one night, while I'm back on the grind, I'm having an argument with my buddy Joshua. And we're arguing about AI's impacts on the entire legal economy. And I see, I know it's super fun stuff. I see a couple of you guys groaning. And actually, funny story, my friends did the same thing when I told them I was skipping our nightly YJA session to go work on some data instead. That was a joke, you're allowed to laugh. And instead, I started working on this data. I'm gonna keep it short. You can find me afterwards if you wanna actually know more. But all I'll tell you is, I found the first evidence that our courts might be dramatically impacted by AI in the coming years, and that there are serious questions of redesign. I mean, this is something that touches every single American and maybe every person in the world, because we all kind of use a court system. So we write up our results, we're pretty excited about them, we release them to the nerd sphere, and the nerd sphere goes crazy. So it's picked up by a bunch of different people. It's picked up by the New York Times, by Bloomberg, by Washington Post, Reuters, NPR, all of them. That's all great. But more than that, it's also actually touching, at least it's entering the conversations, I should say, of the policymakers and kind of the legal designers that I wanted to talk about in the first place. These are, the World Bank, who I did a meeting with last week, a presentation for last week. I'm talking with congressmen. I'm working on a congressional investigation. And I don't say all this to brag. I only say all this to make it clear that this story that I just took, that you guys along the way were like, where is this going? Felt the exact same while I was taking it. Every decision I made was just me doing what I thought was best. And I guess the thing I want to get away from this first story is that most of life is a series of decisions where you're not really sure what the right decision is. You will never know where a decision actually leads you. You can do as much analysis as you want. You can write out all the paths and weight by all the probabilities. You'll just never know. That shouldn't stop you from making the right decision for you. You know who you are. You know what your values are. You know what you like and want from the world more often than you let yourself believe. And maybe the courageous decision is following that feeling. I guess I also want to say here that there's some tendency to feel like there's only courage to be had in big and momentous occasions. Who you're going to end up taking as a partner, or, a certain career interview, something like that. It's just never true. This paper only happened because of this small decision to stay in one night while my friends weren't. Anything could have happened that night, and it was just me being me. So just kind of as Mahavir Bhagwan had no idea what would have happened when he walked out on his worldly life, I think we have no idea what's going to happen as a result of the choices we make. I think this is where I want to leave the first part of my talk. And it does kind of, obviously I'm not Mahavir Bhagwan, but I think we all have stories that are of this shape, where we are one person trying to make a decision, trying to figure out how to apply our values in the world. These are not usually the decisions that require courage. The harder decisions in our lives are usually the decisions with other people, right? So the second part of my talk, the second story I want to share is about a story that I had with my friends in college. In college, and actually I should say before I start, this is where the content warning applies. We will, if you ever thought or know someone thinking thoughts of violence or self-harm in any way, there are many chat lines and crisis lines. In fact, you can text or call 988 for help, and you should probably seek professional help. It's just a story from my life. But in college, I had two roommates who I'll call Dev and Devika. And as sometimes happens in college, Dev started crushing on Devika. Normal stuff. One night while I was gone, he made a move and tried to kiss Devika. Now, Devika was not interested, told him, but then Dev got upset and started yelling at her. Devika texted me that night and was like, listen, I'm not harmed in any way, but there's no way I can stay in this apartment. I don't feel comfortable at all anymore. So that week, we started looking for new apartments. Luckily, we found her a new apartment pretty fast. She moved in a couple of days later. One day while Dave was out doing groceries, we just moved all of her stuff out. But the problem was, this was COVID. So I was still stuck in the apartment with Div. And the first conversation we have, I'm angry at him. So I tell him off, I yell at him. But then after that, I just also don't really feel like I know him anymore. So for the next kind of 2 weeks, we've all kind of experienced this. We are just two ships passing the night. We're two roommates, technically living in the same house. We're not interacting with each other. We're not talking to each other. We're not making jokes over dinner. And this continues, as I said, for almost 2 weeks until I start to notice that Dave is not really acting normal. Dave has already had some mental health issues in the past, and now, it looks like he's spiraling. He usually keeps his beard clean. He's not taking care of himself. He's not really eating. And one night, passing his door on the way to my room, just kind of hear him crying. Now, in this moment, life gives you a choice, right? At this point, it really does feel like he's kind of just a stranger. So really, the question is just, do you knock or do you leave him alone? I think reasonable people might say both things. Just leave him alone. It's not your problem. Or you have to knock. I think I felt like it was a decision that I made pretty fast for myself. I was not raised to be the type of person that doesn't knock. I felt like this is one place where our Jain values actually do have a lot to say. We are the people who don't step on bugs, even when they're annoying us. That means we are also the people who don't step on others, even when we think they're wrong. So I knock on his door, say, hey man, how you doing? He says, not well, honestly. and calls me in, and we have the first conversation we've had in a long time. Through this conversation, I start to learn that however bad I thought Dave was doing, he's actually doing a little bit worse. He's in his head. Everywhere he goes on campus, he thinks people are looking at him and talking about him. And honestly, he's a little true also. He is constantly thinking about things that are happening in his family life right now. And he's worrying about them. He can't get out of that mental space either. And this guy was always one of the most driven people I'd ever known career-wise, and he just completely stopped caring about any of it. I noticed the next day that he's covering his wrists. There's small little cuts. And then a couple of days later, one night, while he's really struggling, I go outside, catch him up on the balcony, pull him down, and explain to him his life is not over. I didn't fix Liv. Honestly, I was just one small part of a very long story for him. And yes, he did get proper support. And indeed, these are also not things that one person fixes, right? They're like complicated situations with many people involved. And I'm talking about the story now as if he was the person that was hurt, which he was, but more importantly, it became like that only because he hurt someone else. But I do want to say that I was there for him, probably in a way that most of us would be there for him. We would not let someone hurt themselves in these ways, no matter who they were. But I would have never been in that position if I did not also ask after him and show him some care when I didn't have to. And I think that's something that I thought about a lot after this incident. And I know this is a sensitive story, particularly given our cultural and community kind of mores. But I do think we have to be able to talk about them, if not just because most of us in this room, either directly or second degree, have some story like this. I think destiny sticks us in these gray spaces all the time between two people, whether they're parents, siblings, friends, and we have to choose a side. At least we feel like we do. And I can't tell you how to act in these sides. That's not my job here. I can't tell you, what values to apply, but I do think that in these complicated situations, more than others, simple, clear values, like the ones Jainism give us, actually can be clarifying. I think, in general, we understand that our intentions and our actions have consequences. You can't run from those. You can't ignore getting karma from a certain type of intent or action just by ignoring it. In general, Jainism, I think, teaches us that the world is always very messy and very complicated. And you will never do better by closing yourself off from one part of the world. The messy truth here was that David had done something wrong, caused harm, but that he somehow also came out of it spiraling. And maybe an even more complicated and messy truth is that I've only given you guys 10 minutes of this story. But of course, it went on much more and much longer than 10 minutes. What I can say is that living courageously, if we think back to the first story, here for me meant holding both of these truths at the same time. Being willing to hold Dave accountable and also being willing to be someone that he could rely on for support. These are both values I still hold as core to my being today. And in both of the stories I've given today, I found myself standing in different gray spaces, the kind destiny hands us all the time, be they with family, with friends, with their careers. And in both, there are something like two paths. The first path is the one that simplifies the world. You choose a side, you continue doing what you've always been doing. You don't really think about what decision you should make. And I hope through both of my stories, I've come to a different idea, which is that Jainism asks you to think, and that this is a different type of courage. To step into gray spaces, hold on to truth, even when it's uncomfortable. I don't think either of these stories are about having a flawless roadmap or about knowing that every decision will turn out perfectly. You will never have that in your entire life. But they are about stripping away who you are from a situation and trying to make a decision that aligns with your values, which you think is right. With the startup, that meant having the honesty to admit defeat, to not succumb to the fear of being embarrassed and to let the world happen to me. And with Div, of course, it meant being willing to see a person's humanity. To remember that all people are people. I think looking forward when you try to plan your life, it's pretty impossible to figure out what's going to happen in a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now. What career you're going to be in, where you're going to be living, who you're going to be married to, what your kids are going to be like. But I do think that when you look backwards, when I talk to the adult volunteers or maybe our older friends at Jaina, they always do seem to say that life makes sense when you connect the dots looking backwards. Bhagwan Mahavir could not see the path of enlightenment or the future of a global religion or even all of us here today at YJA when he walked out of those palace gates. At that point, he had just become a sadhu. At that point, he only had his beliefs. And I think for all of us, we never get to see the ends of our own stories. All we can do is look into the world, see the gray spaces destiny give us, step into them, and be willing to be true to them as we are. Michami Dukaram, thank you. It's okay.
Many of you may agree that growing up in a Jain family is a pretty unique experience. We're taught that Jainism isn't just a religion, it's a way of life, a framework for how we move through the world. And for me, one of the first places I experienced that was through food. From a young age, food became one of the most tangible ways that I practiced ahimsa. We followed a strict Jain diet in my household, thanks to my parents. And we would, check our cilantro for any insects before we would wash or cut anything. And we thought hard about what was on our plate, where it came from, and what harm may have been caused before it got to us. I remember watching my parents make choices based on compassion over convenience over and over again. But if I'm being honest, when I was younger, Jainism felt like a set of rules. And it was all about what to eat, what to avoid, what to say, how to be a good Jain. How karma was your ultimate report card that you needed that 4.0 on. And for a long time, I thought the greatest gift that Jainism had given me was a structure for living. But in my 20s, like maybe some of you, life kept placing me in those gray areas. Moments where values collided, where there was no perfect answer, where life didn't go according to plan, and where no rule could tell me what exactly to do next. That is when I started to understand the tension between the two philosophies of niyati, or destiny, and purusharth, which is our effort, in a much more personal way. I didn't choose the circumstances that shaped me. I didn't choose every experience, every relationship, every challenge. But I could choose how I responded. And slowly, Jainism stopped feeling like this list of rules and rather started becoming a lens. It was a way to accept what was outside my control while still taking full responsibility for what was. A lot of decisions I made in my 20s kept bringing me back to this one question. How do I stay true to my values in a world where not everyone shares them? And for me, one of the first big answers, like many of you might know, was veganism. I grew up avoiding root vegetables to limit harm to microorganisms. I'd been taught to think so carefully about the lives we don't see. And at some point, I started asking myself, if I was willing to do that, how could I ignore the cruelty that is in the dairy industry? These are beings with 5 senses. They're mothers, they have emotions, they have a soul. And once I asked that question, I really couldn't unask it. It was more like this slow internal discomfort that just kept getting louder. So, veganism became one of the ways I tried to align my life with ahimsa. It felt personal, it felt honest. It felt like the next step that I could take with the values I had been given. But living your values gets complicated, especially in your 20s, because suddenly, you're not just making choices in your own kitchen. You're dating, you're building friendships, you're networking at work dinners, you're meeting people who are kind and thoughtful and good, but see the world very differently than you. And the question doesn't go away. It just gets harder. In my 20s, I spent a lot of time thinking about relationships through the lens of niyati. Like, maybe the right person was just fated. Maybe the universe had written that part of my story already and I would come across my Prince Charming. And honestly, a few dating apps and a few boyfriends later, I started to realize maybe niyati gets people into your life, but purusharth is what you do once they're there. I couldn't control who walked into my life. I was unfortunately at the mercy of the Hinge algorithm. I couldn't engineer chemistry or control timing. I couldn't control whether someone's family would accept mine or whether our lives would fit together in the way that I hoped. But I could control how I showed up. I could be honest about the values I wasn't willing to compromise on. I could communicate with care. I could walk away from something that didn't feel right without becoming bitter. And I could treat people with respect even when the relationship didn't become something I wanted it to be. That is where the tension of niyati and purusharth became very real for me. Relationships is when philosophy stops being theoretical. You don't get to write the whole story, and you're still responsible for the way you respond in it. That reframe changed how I approached love. For a long time, I thought I needed somebody who matched every belief, every practice, every choice I made at the dinner table, and that would make life simple. And then I met Yash, who is not vegan and is not Jain. Plot twist, I know. And somehow we figured it out. Because what we shared wasn't a perfect checklist of identical habits. It was a shared sense of how we wanted to move through the world. Our practices looked different, but the intention underneath them, I know, it's pretty funny, right? It worked. It worked. The intention underneath them felt familiar. And that has become even more true in marriage and parenthood. We're raising our son in a Jain Hindu household, figuring out what that means as we go. I love that you guys love the slide. Take some notes, you know? I did block out his number, sorry. He's taken. So Yash completed his first Balitana Jatra a few months ago. And yeah, we were pretty sore afterwards on the way down. And I've learned a mashup of Jain and Hindu bhajans to sing our baby to sleep. We sit at the same dinner table, but make different choices about what's on our plate. He's vegetarian, I'm vegan, and we still cook together. Sometimes it means instead of paneer, we're using tofu. Sometimes it means that our fridge has oat, almond, soy, macadamia nut milk, and maybe some regular milk too. Sometimes it means I tell Yash, can you ask for the cheese on the side? And sometimes it's a really fun journey of discovering the most vegan-friendly restaurant in a city while traveling. And food really became one of the first places that we learned to make our differences work. I still remember when I was dating Yash, I asked him to be in one of my Pinky's Palette reels. And I said, we're gonna make some bangan barla marcha as a recipe. So I'm working on the sabji and I look over and I see him rolling rotis. And they were actually round, like suspiciously round. So jokingly I said, everyone likes a man who can roll a roti. And without missing a beat, he goes, roti husband for the win. Which was pretty bold, we were only dating at this time. But honestly, Roti-matics are pretty expensive, so I've let him hold that title to this day. We've had real conversations, and by conversations I mean debates, about what to feed our dog Soji. Now, she was first his dog, but still. And she makes that known. First woman in his life. I would love for Soji to be vegetarian because I have never touched meat in my life. I don't feel comfortable purchasing or preparing it. Yash feels strongly where he thinks that traditional dog food is necessary for her health. And the funny thing is, both of us are coming from a similar place. We both care about animals. We both care about reducing harm. We just have very different ideas of what Soji's ahimsa meal plan should be. I used to think that if I was living my values clearly enough, that the right answer would always be obvious. But I've learned that sometimes the absence of a perfect answer doesn't mean you're failing. Sometimes that's exactly where Purusharth begins. In that moment, you have to pause and ask, how do I reduce harm here? How do I stay curious instead of defensive? How do I stay honest without becoming rigid? How do I love somebody without needing them to be exactly like me? Because I believe love is not only for the people who agree with us completely. And I say that knowing that I'm not perfect, either. None of us are. So I've learned to be grateful for every single step somebody takes towards compassion, even if it doesn't look like my step. In our relationship, Purusharth looks like curiosity. It looks like communication, trust, and respect. It looks like supporting each other's values even when we practice them differently. And those questions don't resolve everything, but they help orient me. And sometimes that's enough. Here's what I've come to believe. Values don't stay still. They move within you through your actions. And eventually, if you let them, they move beyond you. What started off as me figuring out how to cook in my college dorm slowly became something I wanted to share. I was posting pictures of my very amateur plating skills on my Facebook, Jain-inspired, plant-based. And honestly, I didn't have any big strategy behind it. This was even like pre-social media. I wasn't thinking, this is my brand. I was just living my life, making food that worked for me. And somewhere along the line, I thought, maybe this could work for somebody else too. And that became Pinky's Palette. Over time, it's turned into a community of thousands of people from around the world cooking and exploring these ideas of compassionate living together. I've heard from athletes asking how to fuel on a Jain diet. People in Normandy, France somehow stumbled across my blog. People who were not Jain learned about Jainism for the very first time through food. And my favorite comment to this date is one person who said they wish they could reach through the screen and hug me. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a following, it was a community. And the funny thing is, I didn't set out to build a community. I set out to just be honest about how I was living. And it turned out that honesty, more than any strategy or algorithm, was what people were actually hungry for. And then came the wedding. I wanted a fully Jain, fully vegan wedding in a palace in India. A girl can dream, right? And people had thoughts. I heard the aunties and uncles say, a wedding in India at that scale with no animal products? You mean no ghee, no paneer, no mithai, and oh my God, what about the cha? Like, how is this even a wedding? I heard all of it. But I didn't take that as a no. Because by then I had stopped seeing my wedding as just a wedding. I saw it as the biggest stage that Pinky's Palette had ever had. 200 guests. 3 meals a day for 3 days. That was 1,800 meals and 0 animal products. It was the largest opportunity I ever had to show people what compassionate cooking can actually look and taste like. So I got to work. I obviously couldn't fit that many people in my own home for a dinner party, so this was it. I started pitching my idea to caterers in India. Now, some of you might know that veganism in India is still very up and coming. We don't have as many products as we do here, and the idea of it is still very new. So the caterers I spoke to, I reached out to the top ones and I said, this is what I want to do. And many of them said no. They wouldn't take it. One caterer kind of lifted one ear up, like Soji, and I was like, But they had never done anything like this before, and I understood their hesitation. They were worried about sourcing, they were worried about reputation, they were worried that the dishes that they're so well known for just wouldn't taste the same without the ingredients they're used to using. So, instead of just saying, figure it out, or giving up, I met them where they were. I asked them to send me a whole list of all the Jain dishes they knew how to make. And then one by one, I went through, substitution by substitution, rewriting, adapting, and adding ideas of my own. Because having values is one thing. Making them work in the real world with real constraints and real people who are not yet convinced is something else. That is where our efforts live. Not just in believing in something, in doing the work to make it possible. And if this was going to be a wedding in India, you know it can't just be 3 salads and a sad vegan dessert. If any of you have been to a wedding in India, you know how big food is. It had to be abundant, it had to be joyful. It had to feel like a celebration. 333 dishes to be exact. Each one of them is listed in the background here. My favorites had to be the tiramisu rasmalai and chimichurri pani puri. And it's funny because they say, you know, the bride and groom never get to eat. I made sure I was at every station. And hundreds of people experienced something they never had seen before. A fully Jain, fully vegan wedding menu in India, not because we forced anybody, not because we gave a lecture before dinner, but because we showed them another possibility. And you know what the feedback was? That the food was incredible, that they wanted the recipes, including myself. And the best part, almost nobody realized that it was all Jain or all vegan. 333 dishes, and what people remembered was the joy of eating them. That, to me, is what it looks like when your values move beyond you. Living your values out loud doesn't always mean trying to convert someone. Sometimes it means creating an experience that is so joyful and abundant and thoughtful that people become curious. They wonder, maybe this is possible. Maybe I could try this too. That is what Purusharth means to me today. I can't control every outcome. I can't change everyone's mind. I can't eliminate every form of harm. But I can decide how I show up. In my family, in my relationships, in my work, on my platform, and now on this stage. Up until this point in my life, I thought Purusharth was something active, something I could do. I could choose what I ate. I could choose to start a blog. I could build a community. I could create a vegan Jain wedding menu with 333 dishes. In all of those moments, Purusharth felt like effort moving outward. But then, Life gave me a situation where effort looked completely different. It wasn't about building something or convincing anyone. It wasn't about making a plan and executing it. It was about surviving uncertainty without letting fear become the only truth. Last year, during my first pregnancy, my water broke at 26 weeks. That's 14 weeks early. Now, many of you have probably seen in the movies, water breaks, woman is rushed to the hospital, baby's born. That's when your water is supposed to break. The medical term for this is called PPROM, or preterm premature rupture of membranes. It happens in about 1% to 2% of pregnancies. And unfortunately, often the cause is unknown. Which is a very medical way of saying your whole life can change and no one can really tell you why. One moment, I was planning a baby shower, a maternity photo shoot, a normal birth. And the next, I was laying in a hospital bed, admitted indefinitely until I delivered, hearing words that no parent is ever ready to hear. That my baby might not survive, that extreme prematurity could come with serious lifelong complications or disabilities. That we needed to prepare ourselves for every possible outcome. And I remember one of my very first thoughts. Maybe this was just my karma. I think a lot of us go there in hard moments. Why me? Why now? What did I do wrong? We start treating karma like a verdict, like punishment, like an explanation to somehow make the pain make sense. But after that initial shock settled in, lying in that hospital room, I realized that karma wasn't really the question in front of me. Purusharth was. I don't know why this happened, and I may never know. But Jainism places weight on both sides of the equation. What comes to you, and what you do with it. And what I had to reckon with was that I couldn't control what happened. I couldn't control even the outcomes. I couldn't control if I would deliver the next day or weeks later. The only thing I could control was how I moved through it. Every day I had a choice. I could spend hours spiraling, and to be honest, at first I did. I replayed every scary conversation with the doctors. I imagined every worst-case scenario. I, even as a healthcare provider, Googled things I absolutely should not have Googled. I cried. I panicked. I was human. But at some point, I realized I was already carrying so much, mentally, emotionally, physically. I didn't need to keep manufacturing more suffering on top of it. So I started asking different questions. What can I let into my mind today? What can I choose today? What is still mine? I could have experienced those weeks as only something to survive. And some days it really was just that. But slowly, I started wondering, what can this experience teach me? Is there anything it can teach me? And I don't mean that in a toxic positivity sense. I don't believe that just everything happens for a reason. Some things are just painful. Some things are unfair. Some things we would never choose. But even inside of that, I found myself learning patience, surrender, gratitude, the kind of gratitude that comes when you have nothing left to bargain with. For the first time in my life, planning, preparation, achievement were not enough. And that was very uncomfortable for me because I am a planner. I'm a healthcare provider. I like information. I like being prepared and knowing what comes next. And suddenly I had none of that. None of that could save me from the uncertainty. So I had to find stability somewhere else. One of the things I kept returning to was impermanence. Every frightening day eventually passed. Every difficult milestone eventually passed. Even when progress felt invisible, things were changing. They always are. And one of the hardest lessons was ahimsa, the principle I grew up with feeling like I knew so well how to apply in my life. We usually talk about ahimsa as something we practice towards others, towards animals, towards the environment, towards other people. But in that hospital room, I had to learn to practice ahimsa towards myself. I had to stop treating myself like the enemy. I had to stop asking, what did I do wrong? And start asking, what did I need? What do I need? I want to show you something about how powerful perspective shift can be. My baby might not survive. My baby is still alive today. They're doing so many invasive procedures. We have excellent medical care. We've been here for weeks. Every single day matters. His lungs aren't developed enough. He might not be able to breathe on his own. There's still hope. That is anikantvad to me. The Jain principle that reality has more than one face, but it doesn't mean pretending everything is okay. It means refusing to let fear become your only truth. So I chose, day by day, not to let fear direct my entire experience. Not perfectly, not in every moment, but enough to keep choosing again. I made those hospital walls my home. My sister helped me decorate it like my old college dorm. We put up twinkle lights. She even brought me a stuffed animal that looked like Soji, who I definitely really held on too tight while I was giving birth. Yash and I actually started a calendar diary with affirmations or something meaningful from each day. Not always something that was positive, but also something that we felt or went through. And every day I stayed pregnant, we placed a little pause sticker on that calendar day. And those tiny stickers started to feel like little victories. I rested, I meditated, I talked to my baby. I asked my mom to sing Bhaktamar to my belly every day I was in the hospital. I focused on sending him love instead of fear. And I still tried to honor that pregnancy I had dreamed of, even though it looked completely different. I did the maternity shoot I had imagined with an IV in my wrist in the hospital gardens. We celebrated my kodo, or womb blessing, kind of like the desi baby shower, in the cafeteria courtyard. And yes, I was walking through the hospital halls in a sari. We met with a NICU therapist every week. We prioritized our mental health because we knew we weren't just trying to get through a medical crisis. We were trying to become parents inside of one. The doctors told me most women in my situation deliver within about a week. We made it 8 more weeks. Our son, Aryan, was born at 33 weeks and 6 days. Gosh, it still makes me emotional looking at that. One day before my scheduled induction, because if you have PPROM, they don't let you go past 34 weeks because the risk to the mother gets too high. What timing? 3 pounds and 13 ounces? Born at 3:13? It's kind of cool. He was our little warrior, and he was breathing on his own. Maybe that was our niyati. But no other experience has made me feel the force of worship more deeply. And maybe, just maybe, the way we moved through those 8 weeks mattered. But that wasn't the end of the journey. Aryan spent the next month in the NICU, fighting his own battle. And there's nothing natural about watching your child go through that, about being separated from your child. Every instinct in your body wants to take away their pain, and you can't. As a healthcare provider, I understood exactly what was happening to him. And somehow that made it harder. I was caught between knowing too much and not being able to do anything. And still, every day, I had to show up. I sat at his bedside for 12 hours a day in an old 90s chair with my husband, who was working from his laptop, alarms beeping around us, other babies crying, procedures happening. But we had to show up as Aryan's parents, as husband and wife, as people. Every day felt like a small miracle. I love this photo. That season tested us in every way. But it also brought us unmatched love. perspective, gratitude for our village, our family and friends who came to visit us almost every day I was in the hospital, for our care team, for each other. We are forever changed by that experience in ways I am still understanding and working through. But one thing is that it taught me that strength is not controlling what happens. Strength is deciding who you want to be when you can't control the situation. Recently, we took Aryan back to the same spot in Central Park where Yash had proposed 3 years earlier. And looking at these two pictures side by side also makes me emotional. In the photo on the left, I remember feeling like life is unfolding exactly the way it's supposed to. Like this was destiny. Like we had this beautiful, uncomplicated future waiting for us. And in a way, that was true. But the photo on the right tells a fuller story. It is still love, it is still family, it's still that beautiful future. But now it carries everything that we had to walk through to get there. The hospital room, the fear, the prayers, the NICU, the nights we didn't know what was going to happen next, the choice we made every day to keep showing up with love instead of fear. So now when I look at these photos side by side, I don't see Niyati and Purusharth as opposites. I see them together. Niyati brought us to that place. Purusharth shaped who we became on the way back. And Aryan, sitting there with us 3 years later, is a reminder that sometimes the life you had imagined still arrives. Just changed, deepened, and made more meaningful by everything it took to get there. I want to ask you something. When have you experienced some version of, this is not what I had planned? I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen. What do I do now? Maybe it was a relationship that ended, a career that didn't go to plan, a diagnosis, a rejection, a door that closed before you were ready. That moment is universal. We can't control what comes into our life, our niyati, our destiny. But we can choose not to create more suffering through fear, blame, anger, and resistance. Our effort, our purusharth, doesn't change the situation, but it changes our experience moving through it. Thank you.
Don't worry, we're not quite done yet. People usually think of Jainism as a soft religion. Be gentle, see all viewpoints, don't make big waves, keep everyone comfortable. I think Priyanka's stories, and all the stories today maybe, help us think that maybe it's not so simple. That Jainism asks a lot from us.
And it asks us the most in moments when the answer is the least clear. Because destiny will give us circumstances we can't control. That is our niyati.
But Jainism doesn't end with niyati. That's what we've been trying to say all stories, throughout all of our stories. It does not say, this is your hand, and now the game is over. It says, this is your hand, and what are you going to play with it? And that is Purusharth. Control over what you can control.
We can't tell you what to do with your cards. No one can. Not even Jainism in the form of a simple rule book.
But we do think Jainism can help you ask better questions. Questions like, how can I reduce harm? What am I overly attached to? What perspectives am I missing here? These are the questions that all of our values point towards when we have to figure out where to put our effort.
And so many of you are standing before some really formative decisions in your lives. Who you love, where you live, what kind of impact you want to have.
And these decisions, even from where I am, still in my 20s, look like they're never going to end.
Life keeps dealing you new cards.
But throughout it all, we hope that you have the courage to ask. Not just, what will I do with my cards? But, do I need perfect certainty to live with intention?
We believe that you only need the courage to pause, to reflect, and to choose again.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the art
Of
the in-between. Jason and
Thank you so much to our amazing 22 plus keynote speakers. Let's give them one more round of applause.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.